this was getting a lot of play on the right, I guess. What's his name again?
This is Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. And he was on, this is the Bill Maher show with, who's this guy? John Heilman, is that it?
Yeah, he's an MSNBC. He's the founder of The Recount.
Right, okay. And long time, like, political, like, wasn't he with, like, Politico?
Yeah.
Or what was it? Was it Politico?
He also produced that show, The Circus, on
Okay,
Showtime.
right.
He's
Yeah.
like a, long
Right.
time.
He's like a sort of like
Liberal.
a corporate centrist type of guy. And Russell Brand is a guy who I can't even explain it other than like he's really trying to juice his Rumble numbers.
The epitome of the crunchy, like kind of wellness woo-woo to right-wing pipeline.
I'm a Russell Brand fan, or was a Russell Brand fan going way back. I think he used to have a funny BBC podcast, but his politics have sort of been vague. Showed an interest in like Noam Chomsky and stuff like that, but the past few years it's been Brett Weinstein is an expert on COVID and, basically Joe Rogan's audience he's been playing for.
Now let's be clear here, and he's getting a lot of like plaudits for equating MSNBC with Fox. I am, as far as I know, still a MSNBC contributor. It is true. I don't think I've been on in close to a year, but. Largely that's just because I want to spend time with the kids when I'm there, and then I want to go out and try and have a social life at other times. And regardless, there have always been shows that I would not go on MSNBC. There have been shows that would not have me on MSNBC, and I'm talking over the course of years and years. When I first went on MSNBC, it was Tucker Carlson and Joe Scarborough at night, and I would go on those shows, and I would get in arguments with them. The MSNBC has really larded up on Republicans over the years. I am not. I have no say over that. I am not terribly happy about it. I will not go on a show with someone like Bill Kristol. There was one time I was booked with him. I didn't know he was on it. He showed up. There was like joviality, and I said, that's the last time that happens. You can bring me on, I'll argue with him, but I won't do it again. To make an equivalence between, particularly poorly chosen day to go and make this defense of any other type of Fox News, but to make an equivalence between MSNBC and Fox News. MSNBC, quite clear, like, former Republicans. We can see what their ideology is. There's no doubt a lot of people on all these things are completely careerist. But the level of like lack of integrity at Fox is just sort of like off the scale.
It is irresponsible to conflate the two.
They're different. They're different things. Like the problem with MSNBC is, like you said, like they allow too much
corporate media. That's always been
right. It's capitalist media. Like, what do we expect?
Yeah, you can have there's a corporate media critique. Then there's the Fox critique.
It's a political party.
But here is Russell Brand having his moment.
John, I've not known you long, but I love you already. But I have to say that it's disingenuous to claim that the biases that are exhibited on Fox News are any different from the biases exhibited on MSNBC. It's difficult to suggest that these corporations operate as anything other than mouthpieces for their affiliate owners in BlackRock and Vanguard. And unless we start to embrace, and also, mate, like just spiritually, if I may use that word in your great country, we have to take responsibility for our own perspective. I've been on that MSNBC, mate. It was propagandist nutcrackery on there. I went on a show called Morning Joe. It was absurd the way they carried on.
Good Morning Joe.
I don't know what it was. It wasn't morning. There was no one called Joe there. No one could concentrate. They didn't understand the basic tenets of journalism. No one was willing to stick up for genuine American heroes like Edward Snowden. No one was willing to talk about Julian Assange and what he's suffered trying to bring real journalism to the American people. And I think to sit within the castle of MSNBC throwing rocks at Fox News is ludicrous.
My friend,
make MSNBC better. Make MSNBC great again.
My friend, the moment
fight them on a territory you can win on, Joe.
Russell, darling, the moment that you give me a specific example An actual example.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Wait, just wait.
Race
Just
don't matter.
wait.
Just we need a specific example.
Let me tell you what the specific I'd like to hear of. I'd like to hear a specific example, a provable specific example of an MSNBC correspondent or anchor being on television saying something they knew was false and were saying behind the scenes to people, I'm about to go out and we know that the election wasn't stolen or something equivalent.
Example.
But I will go out on television and say the opposite. I will lie.
When's my answer?
Just give me the specific example.
I understand the basic point.
Give me a specific example.
All right.
I'm with you. I think it's a false equivalency, Russell.
No, it's not. That's your own bias.
It's not about bias. It's a false equivalency because you don't actually know anything about any of these organizations you're talking about. Even on MSNBC once, big fucking deal.
My darling, it was more than enough.
You can't come up with such a you don't have a single actual fact.
Do you want an example?
Yes.
The ludicrous, outrageous criticisms of Joe Rogan around Ivermectin, deliberately referring to it as a medicine when they know it's an effective medicine.
That's not a bad
Rachel
example.
Maddow turning up on the TV saying, if you take this vaccine, you're not going to get it when it hadn't been clinically trialed for transmission.
Non-responsive.
You have to listen.
Wait.
Do you think you can improve America by determining...
Okay. If your two examples, and I think like that was back, like I say, I haven't been on at least a year, and I went on to say, and I don't know if it was about Ivermectin, that Spotify had some responsibility for the misinformation that Joe Rogan was putting out. And I didn't say it was horse paste, even though it is horse paste. It has other applications. But the point is, it doesn't have an application in the context of COVID. When Rachel Maddow said that the vaccine inhibits transmission, A, it did. B, it was during the wild type. And C, it was to the best of what science was at that time. But all those three things, they play her video, and I am no defendant of hers. I have never been on her program. It is not a coincidence by any stretch. But the fact is they've dined on this for years. And they are taking that one statement, which at the time was true. It did inhibit the transmission of...
I can't remember how definitive she was entirely, but
well, she was probably more definitive than it should have been.
Right.
But you could have said it has 70%, cuts down your transmission rates by 70%, as opposed to saying it will cut down the transmission.
Yeah.
And that's the conflation too of the difference between a evolution of scientific thought as new information comes in about a novel virus and a purposeful disinformation campaign waged on the daily basis by a corporation where we have internal documents and text messages from their top hosts showing that they know that they are lying on air. And then, I mean, he's right in the way that he's combating Russell here.
What's so amazing is that these are the two, those are the same clips that you have seen over and over and over again on that, the group of anti-establishment, really no ideology to back up any of that.
Yeah.
There's nothing other than being mad at dad.
Media branding.
Yeah.
But that's it, Matt. It is a personal branding exercise in the same way that they pretend like the rest of corporate media is doing it. I mean, or they accuse them of it. This is just more like, come to us because we're the true truth tellers. And the way that you widen your net as much as possible to get a certain kind of audience is to say that it's the same on both sides.
Yep.
And usually when then you build an audience based on anti-vax misinformation, that begins to trend more right-wing. The flattening of that dynamic between Fox News and what they do and the rest of corporate media is a way to serve yourself, and it's a lie. It's not sexy to say that the Democrats are a little bit better than the Republicans too, right? And that you should be voting Democrat, even if they're a little cringy and it's a part of an overall strategy for voting, because it doesn't appeal to people's visceral emotional reaction to Big Daddy. This is the same kind of thing. And eventually this kind of thought leans right wing. We saw it with Jimmy Dore. Republicans and Democrats are saying the same thing. Like, whatever Russell's doing here, he's taken photos with Don Jr. already. Like this is a right wing line of thought. And this kind of thinking is a right-wing pipeline.
There's a faux Chomsky sort of analysis going on here where it's like, oh yeah, these are all the same sort of thing. Well, like either like one of them is just partisan. Like who are the Democrats that Fox News, even like Manchin, like I guess occasionally maybe they'll have Joe Manchin on something like that, but like they're entirely different sort of like. I mean, I guess you could just ask Chomsky. Like maybe,
well, but here's the difference. What you're doing is not just sort of saying they're all bad. What you're doing is you are undermining the critique that they are corporately controlled and push an agenda of the corporate class. Mm-hmm. You're undermining that by making the equivalence with Fox News, because Fox News is not only doing that. Of course, they're doing that. But they are also completely an arm for a right-wing movement, and they are dedicated to feeding back to their audience a regurgitated set of lies that goes beyond the corporate thing. So you can't even that guy Heilman is a perfect example of like a corporate beltway media shill, whatever it is. I mean, like literally, like when he was at like Politico, they were like, where the new place he went to, Axios, was that what it is? Or where's his new place?
He founded the Recount.
Okay, the Recount. It's like their innovation is like, how can we get BP to sponsor our coverage of climate change?
Yeah.
That's just an example. You lose that critique. That critique becomes submerged when you conflate it with what Fox News does, which is, of course, that, but then they are literally the mouthpieces of a very specific conservative agenda and taking people down a wormhole far away from that type of capitalist critique, far away from even seeing it, from even caring about the thing. Like the big story that these guys promote, the Russell Brands and whatever it is that the real enemy are the oligarchs. And you need to know that, right? That's what their argument is. There is nothing that takes people further away from the understanding of that than what Fox News does and what Alex Jones does and what all of their conspiracy-laden stuff does.
No, and what he's doing there. What he's doing there.
Servers in Belgium and SWAT teams and weather machines and, Clinton's got Parkinson's and they're murdering people on the streets of D.C. I mean, that's what's going on here.
And I'd also say, I think Mehdi's contextualization of, for instance, Assange is better than even Tucker Carlson's.
Yeah, he's on that. Well, and Bernie Sanders was on that show at the same time he came on later to talk with Russell Brand, and Russell's cheering a lot of what Bernie had to say about corporate rule and poverty and things like that. It's no different than when Trump is going out there and saying, I want to give everybody health care, right? Like that you can believe these kinds of things. And I'm not saying Russell Brand's like Trump. Again, I've seen him live. I was a big fan for a long time. But you are flattening power dynamics and diverting the necessary attention away from actual power structures when you pretend there's this false equivalence. It's the trappings of populism without the actual necessary means to change power in this country.
I mean, it's moronic that he's basically been gassed up by people like Brett Weinstein. Like when he was on Rogan, they said he was some sort of expert, and he's a quack. So that says as much as you need to know about Russell Brand's sort of ability to process these things.
All right. 646-257-3920 is number. Taking phone calls going forward. Kentucky Bloomer on the IM. You can tell that Russell is an obvious shill because he criticizes BlackRock and Vanguard for investing in corporate media, but won't dare say a bad thing about Peter Thiel, who owns Rumble, which hosts Russell's content and Palantir's attempts to privatize England's NHS.
That's a very good point. And yeah, Russell being bought by those guys is disappointing, but yeah, you know.
And his Joe Rogan fixation. Does Joe Rogan work for free?
Spotify happens to be a massive corporation.
It's a corporation? I thought it was a cooperative.